I wish to spill blood, not ink.
Aegon, you're gonna have to wait till season 3 on that one. First off, spoiler warning. If you haven't watched all of House of the Dragon seasons 1 and 2, and if you haven't watched Game of Thrones, I highly suggest you don't watch this video at the moment and come back to it at a later time because they both will be spoiled in this video. House of the Dragon Season 2 is a season about waiting. Rhaenyra is forced to wait in Dragonstone when she desperately wants to take action against the High Towers. Aegon is forced to wait still in his bed after sustaining an injury during battle. The people of King's Landing are forced to wait inside the city gates and be dependent on the crown during wartime. Daemon must wait in Harrenhal to gather an army in the Riverlands. To have the act of waiting, which is fundamentally not fun, be the foundation of a season of TV is equal parts bold and foolish. Now, House of the Dragon Season 2 is not a season that is totally overwhelmed, sabotaged by how all its characters are forced to wait, but it also is not a season that consistently succeeds in making the inaction of its characters compelling. Season 2 sees teams Black and Green curry favor with every goddamn house in Westeros in order to raise an army and defeat the opposing side. With respect to Team Black, Rhaenyra may have the rightful claim to the throne, she may be on the side everyone wants to win, but she also suffers the grave misfortune of being surrounded by the most toothless, boring people in all of fantasy. It's worth remembering that Game of Thrones didn't just have its entire roster fully formed and ready to go at the end of Season 1. Season 2 introduced excellent new characters like Stannis, Davos, Melisandre, Marjorie, Roose Bolton, Ygritte, but it also seriously upgraded characters that were good in Season 1 but not stellar until Season 2, like Arya, Tywin, and Theon. Now, it's a tall order to either introduce or upgrade 9 characters in that manner, but I'm not convinced this season brings to the table one new character that is in the same ballpark as any of these guys, and it's not for lack of trying. Many of these episodes are weakened by the flow being disrupted by the showrunners admirably trying to get us invested in some of the minor characters. But Ulf, Hugh, Corlys, his bastards, Baela, and Mysaria all stink up the joint whenever they're on screen. They are so dry. The characters don't have a strong screen presence, or they have uninteresting motivations, or both. And I really hope that when we look back upon Season 2, we don't forget about how, without fail, Corlys' moments with his sons were always the set time that everyone would check their phone during the episode. So why is Rhaenyra particularly hurt by this issue? Well, it's because these new weak side characters, these characters that desperately needed upgrades this season but didn't get them, they're by her side. So if you're a Rhaenyra fan, I hope you're ready for a lot of Mysaria constantly reiterating in so many different ways that the pen is mightier than the sword. Rhaenyra's exchanges on Dragonstone are punishingly repetitive. She week in and week out tells anyone who can listen that she wishes she had a sword, wishes she was on the battlefield with her dragon, and then someone else, whether it be Mysaria, Jace, her council, says she can and that her life is too valuable, she's a beacon of hope, she's doing exactly what she's supposed to be doing, rinse and repeat. Emma D'Arcy's unreal performance as Rhaenyra, her portrayal of Rhaenyra's fatigue and helplessness, does a lot for these sections, but I think Dragonstone was the most uninteresting place in Westeros in Season 2. That, I imagine, is quite an unpopular opinion, as fan favorite Daemon was humiliated both by the people of the Riverlands and by his own dreams. He could not catch a break this year. I'm not going to be a total contrarian and say this was the show at its peak, but I also don't believe his stint at Harrenhal was a total failure either. The dreams were bad in my opinion. They were an orgy of cameos meant to get people talking online about certain actors being back when Alcock and Considine could have been utilized so much more impactfully if they had returned at a later date. The dreams are frequently meant to creep us out, but they lack any formal creativity. The camera and audio are never used in an unsuspecting way. Instead, when they want to catch us off guard, they just throw Daemon in a cunnilingus scene with his mother. Call it a day. Ooh, how radical, HBO. A little Freudian action. Truly daring in the 21st century. You're daring enough to do that, but too cowardly to throw in a dolly zoom or, God forbid, a roll to make these dreams unusual and weird in some sort of tangible way. But when you take the dream stuff out, I think Daemon's time at Harrenhal is unequivocally great. These minor characters like Oscar Tully stand out in spite of their limited screen time. Daemon getting called out on his bluff by the Brackens is one of the funniest moments in the show, and Simon Strong, his kindness and willingness to be so welcoming, to have goose and duck and all of this food prepared for Daemon when Daemon is either so mean to him or tripping balls right next to him at the table is routinely very funny. Daemon may stay in one location, but his interactions don't remain stuck in a loop like Rhaenyra's. He initially conveys that he is raising an army for Rhaenyra and verbally bullies anyone that he comes across. Then, he makes it quite apparent that he is raising this army for his own claim and is met with resistance even by Simon Strong in that excellent exchange where Simon calls him the king consort. He then is forced to bend his principles and his plan because he needs the Riverland forces. He may have a dragon, he may have all his bravado, but the exchanges near the end of the season make it quite clear that Daemon is not manipulating these people through fear, he's really dependent on them. Like that, for me, is a really interesting narrative arc for a character to go through over a season of TV, and I think people were so hung up on what they thought Daemon is, how Daemon should behave over a course of a season, that they overlooked how funny and fascinating his journey was throughout Season 2. The critique I understand more is that the opportunity cost of having Daemon away from the heavy hitters is too high. That I completely get because the scene between Daemon and Rhaenyra in episode 2 is phenomenal. It's one of my favorite exchanges in all of the Thrones TV shows, and it's emblematic of the strengths of season 2. First off, I think the conversations have a higher quality floor than the first time around. Last season, I think the writers struggled in keeping the dialogue appropriate for the world of Westeros. There were too many moments, like when Rhaenyra goes up to Otto, rips off his badge, and says fucking traitor, that felt too modern. These exchanges felt like verbal anachronisms, and they were distracting because of it. I think Season 2 resolves this problem, and impressively delivers dialogue that feels of a different era, of a different time period, without the word choice ever making the dialogue inaccessible. The second big strength is the acting across the board, and because of that, I have to give a shout out to the casting director or directors for finding all these people, because it's damn near everyone. Like, I have complained about The Bear, which takes place in current day Chicago, having moments where I do not believe what the actors are selling, where their performances are overcooked and too dramatic, and in this fantasy show with dragons and black magic and the highest of stakes, I'm not sure if there's a single moment that felt overdone, unnatural, or seriously failed to replicate human interaction, and that is a feat. And where are the strengths of the show really accentuated? Well, just like in Game of Thrones, it's in King's Landing. House of the Dragon in Season 2 may have struggled in upgrading the characters that were not so inspired from Season 1, but Rhaenyra aside, all the ones that were great last time are even better in this go, and most of them just so happen to be in King's Landing. Aemon's coup, the ascension of Criston Cole, Alicent being stripped of power and the regret she has for setting this whole thing in motion, Larys making errors and having to re-strategize, Otto's indignation and departure, most of the things here are gold, and Aegon specifically has the Midas touch. Aegon is my MVP of the season. I imagine he's the MVP for many other viewers as well, and what's so remarkable to me about Aegon is that this is a character who occupies the same role as Joffrey. He has the same appearance as him. He is yet another king who has no reason to be on the throne, yet they add very specific accents to his character that make him different and so interesting. Joffrey relishes sitting on the throne, and Aegon detests it. Joffrey does not have a kind bone in his body, while Aegon is sympathetic to the struggles of his subjects, even if he's advised to not help them. Joffrey accepts verbal abuse from his uncle and grandfather alike, along with many other characters. He flees from the Battle of Blackwater, whereas Aegon goes and stands up to his grandfather. He takes initiative. He goes into battle on his dragon. The characters share some traits, but the components of Aegon that differentiate him from Joffrey make him a really complex and fascinating person to sit the throne. One of my favorite moments from the season is when Aegon is crying alone and Alicent finds him but keeps on walking. It's easy to feel bad for Aegon, his son was just beheaded, but I did not find the scene to simply be an expression of the grief he has for losing his son. He's crying because he is alone. He has no one to show him love, to show him an ounce of kindness, because everyone around him is using him for their own aims and to grasp at a power that he has no desire to have. I thought there were true layers of sadness in that scene, and I found it to be really emotionally affecting. Now, I have to hit the brakes a wee bit here, because when you lay everything out like that, this sounds like a real mixed bag of a TV show. I mean, the tertiary characters are failures, the stuff at Dragonstone is underwhelming, the stuff with Daemon is hit and miss, and the stuff at King's Landing is superb. That doesn't sound like a stellar combination of elements. However, it's worth mentioning that the tertiary characters are really de-emphasized, and the stuff at King's Landing always finds a way to be prioritized in any given episode. So even the weaker episodes of the season, episodes 3 and 6 in particular, aren't terrible. I also must mention that the way I've broken down the season up to this point, it's helpful, it's informative, but it's also a bit misleading, because 3 of these episodes, episodes 1, 2, and 8, are an open rebellion to the structure of characters being segmented away from one another, and 4 takes on a different flavor because of everyone's in a panic over Rook's Rest. I'm gonna be honest, this is a frustrating piece of media to talk about because this is the season of waiting, of build-up. Everyone will remember it for the characters being separated, and yet 4 of the episodes, which constitute half the season, don't really follow that formula and are the best episodes of the season. Episode 1 is my favorite. It is amazing, and it's so weird because it's nothing like the rest of the season. It doesn't have any infighting. These two camps are plotting against each other. It's a very simple dynamic, but one that reminded me so much of Empire Strikes Back and the way it perfectly bounced momentum back and forth from one camp to the other as they were plotting. And it ends with a really well-directed and tense climax that has that signature Game of Thrones cruelty that is kind of lacking in the rest of the season. Episode 2 is the perfect follow-up, an actor showcase episode where the performances and moments are so big but never feel outlandish, and there's really intriguing story progression as cracks start to show in both teams. Episode 4 has this great big fight feel to it. It delivers, as others have said, a well-earned, well-constructed spectacle that is wondrously built up over the episode, but it also doesn't forget to touch upon the smaller character moments. It doesn't forget about Aegon and his insecurities, his frustrations with not being heard by anyone around him. It touches upon Rhaenyra, the doubts others have, both inside her camp and outside of it, about how this woman can lead a violent conflict in this time. I know the finale is not doing too well in the court of public opinion right now, but I must say, to me, it's the exact type of episode that displays characters making decisions, choosing who to side against and with, can be just as thrilling, just as exciting as steel clashing, fire and blood being on screen. And even the Tywin Lannister stuff, I must say, it was funny enough where everyone around me was laughing at it and enjoying it. They didn't feel like scenes that were pointless digressions. The season is quite odd to me. It will inevitably be remembered for the manner in which it separated the main cast, the manner in which it was more so about the build-up to warfare as opposed to the warfare itself, and the weaknesses that came from those storytelling pursuits. At the same time, half of these episodes ignore one of those pursuits, and they end up being anywhere from great to amazing fantasy television. So why is House of the Dragon Season 2 a step backwards? Because it does not justify its main conceit, which is that carving up this ensemble is a worthwhile endeavor for a whole season of TV. It's not, and the second Archie and Smith were back on screen together, it reminded me of the potential this season wasted in not letting the relationships the cast and crew worked hard to establish really be fully showcased. This season is great, really in spite of the sort of kind of commitment to character isolation and waiting. Thankfully, the 4 episodes that don't honor that commitment are just so triumphant, and the 2 episodes that I think are flawed but still good really put the season over the edge of good into great thanks to some key features. In episode 5, I think it's some uncharacteristically strong Jacaerys material, and in episode 7, of course, it's that climax. And it was a close call, but I do think this is a great season of TV. I think it's an 8 out of 10, but no higher. This is an 8.0. There are some serious flaws here that's got me concerned for Season 3, particularly the lack of a deep bench that wasn't a problem at all in the slightest in early Game of Thrones. But at the same time, you can't help but feel excited for the Battle of the Gullet, for these other great moments in Fire and Blood, because there is a lot of strong material here. So that's what I got for today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.